What's up, kaiju seekers? Welcome to another video. Today's topic is going to revolve around the genre of Kaijupunk, something that has been brought up recently from creators such as the Omni Viewer and also discussed about with Zimzilla99 over here on YouTube. He had a stream a little bit ago discussing Omni Viewer's points on Kaijupunk and the genre that he is trying to trailblaze for. Essentially, he is Omniviewer is a author who has written a few books that he is categorizing as Kaijupunk, and Zimzilla's stream focused on what exactly does that mean, what are some of the criteria for the punk genre, what makes it punk, things like that. And as I was rewatching the live stream, I got thinking about, what is Kaijupunk, and a lot of the discussions and points brought up in that stream had reminded me of a film that I am a fan of, one that I have not seen many people talk about, especially in the kaiju community as a whole. I rarely see it brought up. Maybe I'm not looking hard enough for, I guess, its own sub fandom that could be here or there. But maybe this will be the start of bringing that to my attention. But that is the film Rumble. Now, this is a children's animated feature that came out a few years ago, and it centers around kaiju, and the term is only thrown a few times in that film, kaiju itself, but it is clearly a kaiju film. It has kaiju inspirations. Like I said, it mentions the name a few times. It does use the term monsters more, like just a general term monster. But the film centers around kaiju monster wrestling. And one of the criteria that Zim brought up in his video is having the world revolve around that specific thing, or fueling, the world in some way through that. It means like steampunk, You have things that revolve around steam-powered vehicles, weapons, instruments, things like that. As well as other examples like, bamboo punk, stone punk, things like that, and what those things mean. And also just the criteria of having elements of punk that are things like resilience, resistance, counterculture, things like that, which is very much associated with the punk genre or phrase in general. And what I think I've come to the conclusion of is that the film Rumble fits very much into the criteria of being a true kaiju punk story. It might be maybe at this point the truest way to describe Kaijupunk, because of, as I said, this is a world that revolves around kaiju wrestling. And in various examples in the film are things like there are towns in the film whose financial structure is dependent upon having a kaiju wrestler from that town and getting revenue from things like merchandise, tourism, things like that. Like if a town doesn't have its own kaiju wrestler, probably is off the maps, doesn't exist practically. There is also underground fighting, so like this whole underground black market type of thing, to where you have illegal fighting clubs, things like that, with well-renowned fighters in the underbelly of that system. There's also things like marketing, different factions, groups, things like that, world famous wrestlers of that world of wrestling for monsters. And I think that very much fits into this classification of or requirement. I don't even know if requirement's the right word, but just that thing where you have the world revolve around this one thing, and that makes up that specific genre. And another thing was those very story elements of resistance, resilience, counterculture. The story itself is about a wrestler who has a long-lasting legacy, and he's trying to make his way reluctantly, admittedly, into the world of the popular wrestling system. And to do so, he sort of has to resist the pre-established way of might makes right. You have to be the toughest wrestler, the best fighter. And his way that he learns in the film is using dance choreography to influence his wrestling moves. And so in that way, I think that's sort of like the counterculture aspect of defying expectations and making your own style in the world that's like predisposed you to acting a certain way, and like, you know, using tradition over non-traditional means. And in that way, I think in those two aspects, I would say Rumble itself really does make itself the truest form of Kaijupunk in terms of like that growing genre that Omnivore is trying to like cultivate and like establish. And I think acknowledging that film as one of the truest forms of Kaijupunk is gonna probably go a good way in establishing what the genre is and what it could mean. And I think there are other things Zimzilla talked about in terms of like what it means to be like punk, and things like aesthetics versus like actual writing and world building there. And I would say in both ways, Rumble really stands out because the world building is just, like I said, pretty fleshed out. You have things like underground fighting, marketing, financial dependency on the wrestlers. You have like, I think there's some like terms thrown around in there. That's like a mix of like, you know, kaiju filmmaking genre tropes as well as like wrestling culture. So you have those two things that go into it and they combine to make like, you know, an ultimate, you know, like two sides of one coin kind of world, to where you have like just a lot of different aspects thrown in. And so more than just the aesthetics of the whole punk genre, you have actual storytelling that goes into, you know, just building the story and the world that it takes place in. And those are my main points in support of Rumble. Other than that, like I said, I think it's a very good film. The characters are very well developed and established, as well as designed. The monsters, same goes for them. The monsters in this film are essentially, I want to say, I think the right word is like sapient, in terms of they are basically just big humans. So they like talk, walk, and just act like humans, but just big, and they're monsters. So there's like that aspect to it too that I think is really interesting. And I would hope we get to see more of things like that in terms of what like Kaijupunk is, because I think that other films like I think that Zim mentioned too, or things like Pacific Rim, like maybe Monster Hunter was thrown around as a like example of like stone punk, and I think if you like apply those same rules but use kaiju instead, that can be very much a thing, a story that falls into the Kaijupunk genre. And like there might be many more stories like it that revolve around it, because like I don't think like the kaiju have to be like these sapient characters in the story, but like that aspect of them, the world revolving around them or changing due to it. I would agree or state that like I think that is very important to what Kaijupunk is and things like that, because like you can have just a story of a world with kaiju in it, as opposed to a world that revolves around the kaiju. It makes it a part of that story. And I think that the reasons I listed there are why Rumble is one of the truest examples of that. And you know, with that, I'll probably leave it off there, since this is just an off-topic video that I've been wanting to make, stating my points, explaining a little bit of why I think the film fits into that genre, and it's probably like the truest form of it. Let me know what you guys think below. I may be organizing a stream discussion if I can plan it out with people like Zim, maybe Omnivore if he wants to join, since I know he was in the chat for that particular stream he did. And anyone else who wants to discuss Rumble, I don't know if any of you guys have or my friend group have seen it, but I would recommend it. I think it's a good film. You know, it's nothing too serious, but it is a pretty like heartwarming, light-hearted film about, you know, perseverance, you know, meeting the challenge, things like that. And you know, like I said, you know, anyone else who wants to be part of the discussion, leave down your thoughts below, and I'll probably bring them up in the stream if that comes to pass. But other than that, thank you all for watching this video, my discussion on it. Continue to let me know your thoughts below, and until next time, Kaiju Seekers, over and out.